Okay, welcome everyone to session 4 of this GDPR Essential series. It's the last one in the series. Um, we run session 4 actually, well, we run each session twice each week, as you know, once at 9:30 on a Tuesday morning, and then again at 3 o'clock on Wednesday afternoon, which is where we are today. So this is the very last session of GDPR Essentials. All the recordings should have been sent out to you, or will be sent out to you, along with the workbooks. And so, yeah, always welcome any feedback at the end on how it's drawn. So let me try and share my screen. I can see a few people still coming in, so I'll give them a chance to settle in and share my screen. And then away we go. So today we are going to finish off by talking about data privacy impact assessments and children's data. So we're going to explore how to manage high-risk processing through data privacy impact assessments and how to address the unique responsibilities we have and very special responsibilities we have when we're processing children's data. So today we're going to cover what is a DPIA, what is a data privacy impact assessment, or some people call it data protection impact assessment. The DPIA process, what's involved in that. We're going to look at some tools and templates. Then we're going to turn our attention to children. We're going to look at understanding the children's code, the key principles of the code, and applying the code in practice. And then we round off with a recap and some key takeaways, and then we'll have time for question and answers at the end. And if this session is the same as yesterday's, then it should take us about 25 minutes to run through all of the slides, so we should have plenty of time for questions. So let's begin with what is a DPIA? It's a tool to help you identify and minimize data protection risks early, especially with new projects or technologies. And I can't emphasize the real requirement to produce DPIAs before you start a new process. So think about the DPIA when the process is at its embryonic stage, not when it's fully fledged. Not too many times, I think, I get asked to go and perform a DPIA on a process which a company spent 2 years developing. They probably had software developed, or they've had special macros developed, or whatever. And now, right at the end, they suddenly think, oh, do you know what? This is involving personal data. We really ought to run a DPIA for this. I would say avoid that if you can. A, because it's hard work, but B, because as well, it's a lot more expensive to do it that way because A, it's likely to take longer to do the DPIA because you've actually got a system to test rather than just hypertesticals. And the second is that if you do then need any changes to make it DPIA, to make the DPIA acceptable, so you make any changes to your programming or to your macros or to your way of working, whatever, then that's likely to have a cost. And I dealt recently with an organization where they were very late doing their DPIA, but they suddenly realized that they needed to do one. They got me involved to do it. We did the DPIA. There were various items on which it failed the DPIA. And then they had to go back to their developers and say, can you sort these problems out? Which caused a bit of friction because the organisation, the sponsoring organisation, had already spent 95% of the budget. So there was not a lot of money left to spend on the alterations that were needed. Now, in the end, we got that all resolved because they needed to bring the product or the solution to market, but it was much, much more expensive for them than it would have been if they'd carried out a DPIA on day one. Often either doing a DPIA yourself on day one or involving someone like myself to do a DPIA for you on day one can mean that problems are spotted long in advance of them actually being problems. And so it gives that time to find solutions to those problems and ways that perhaps, okay, you can handle that data, but you need to do X, Y, and Z first. And if we start on day one, then we can build X, Y, and Z into the process. So what is the process overview? And to break this down for you, the DPIA process follows a clear structure, and we're going to describe what's happening, question if it's necessary, and then, of course, with part of the process, you have to assess the risk to individuals, and you have to outline how you plan to reduce the risk. Often it's a case that you can't eliminate risk altogether. That's just not possible. But you can identify measures to mitigate the risks. And I'm a big fan, and I know other people seem to like it as well, of using the RAG formula with risk, i.e., red for serious risk, stop, don't do that, too dangerous. Amber is there is a risk, there's a significant risk, but we can find ways to address the risk. Green is there's either very low risk or no risk at all. And I think everybody's risk matrices, is that a word? Risk matrix, anyway, got updated recently when the Spanish and Portuguese power networks all went down for a day. So suddenly there was no power, but not only no power in lots of places, no internet, no mobile phone, nothing. And lots of people's risk matrices up to that point probably hadn't included the thought that there could be absolutely no power at all. Because the way that lots of organizations are now, and lots of processes are, where processing is done in the cloud, well, it might be fine that you might have uninterruptible power supply. You might have a backup generator for your office. It's a fat lot of good if your ISP, your internet service provider, has gone down. Because, if it's a process that's in the cloud, it might still be running wherever it is. Let's suppose it could be in California, but you're here in Suffolk in the UK, let's say, and you've got no power, and you've got your backup power, but your ISP's got no power, so you've got no internet connection. That process may as well not be running because you can't access it. You can't access any of the data on it. You don't know where of doing it. And I think it was only when we had this nationwide power shortage, outage in Spain and Portugal for pretty well a whole 24 hours that it made people realise that really power outage was something which everyone now needs to be including in their risk matrix. So say that's why you can't totally eradicate risk, but you can identify mitigation measures that you can take. And again, that's about assessing the necessity and the proportionality, because again, if it's, half a dozen metals that you're processing, it's not high risk data. If you couldn't process that for 24 hours, would that really mean the world would stop? Probably not. But if it's someone's house data, 24 hours could literally be life or death. And so, you do need to look upon that risk and, as I say, assess the risk in terms of necessity and proportionality. So in terms of tools and templates, we have a DPIA template, which we'll be sending out with the notes from this session, which you're more than welcome to use. Very importantly, though, not every process actually needs a DPIA. And so what we also include with the DPIA template is our screening checklist, which basically gives you a set of questions that you go down, and if the answer to all of those questions is no, then you don't need to do a DPIA. If the answer to any of them is yes, then you do need to do a DPIA. But it can save a lot of time because if you just go down that checklist and that takes you 2 minutes and you're like, okay, yeah, we don't need to do a DPA. Brilliant. All good. But if you do need to do DPA, then it's important that you A, follow the template, do all the various stages, but B, make sure that you are talking to the right people. Because yes, you probably need to talk to your IT people, whether that's internal or external. But you might well also need to speak to your senior management team. You might also need to speak to your legal team because there might be situations where technically a procedure is fine, but it has some legal hurdles. So all of those parties need to be involved in the DPIA. If it's involving external software, or particularly if it's involving external software as a service, so again, a cloud solution, you very much need to involve that supplier within your DPIA. Now, it may well be, if they're a supplier of note, that they've actually been through that DPIA process with 100 other customers already. And they can provide you with lots of the answers to the DPIA just straight off the bat. In which case, well, that's brilliant. It saves you time, saves them time, makes everything very much easier. So that's DPIAs. Let's now have a look at the children's code and understanding the children's code. So just what is it? It's a code which was developed which emphasizes limited data use, clear language, and protecting children from overreach. What do I mean by that? It means turning off geolocation by default because with very few exceptions, unless your app or your solution is for parents or guardians to track where their children are, it's hard to find otherwise really why you need to know where the child is. Yes, you might need to know at a top level. You might need to know countries so that you can serve the right language, maybe if it's a multi-language solution. But other than that, do you really need to know the location of the child? Because the danger is if you need to know the location of the child and someone does manage to hack their way into your system, then you've got a problem because suddenly really bad actors could know where children were. And obviously that's a real high risk. So if you don't need to know where the child is, don't collect the information on where the child is. The standard itself, the code, includes 15 design standards, different things that it recommends in terms of app and web design that mean that the end result is well designed and features all the things that it should do for children to use the app or the website or the web app successfully but safely. And the emphasis is 100% on safety within the children's code because it's designed as your app should be or your web app should be to focus on the best interest of the child because that's what really, really matters. So the key principles of the code are some of it's very common with GDPR, to be honest. Data minimization. So only keep the minimum amount of data you need to hold to actually make the thing function. Transparency. Be open on what you're doing with the code. And that in itself can give a problem, by the way, because the children's code actually says that if you are preparing, if you are having an app or a service which is available to children, then the privacy policy has to be, privacy notice has to be in a form of language which the child can understand. Now, believe me, I've been there, done it, got the t-shirt. It's not easy because what I found when we tried to do this was that writing a privacy policy that a 13-year or an average 13-year-old can understand is easy. Might just be a little softer than adult language, but that's all. they get it. And because they've grown up in a IT enabled world, um, they understand why it's important as well. So 13-year-olds, yeah, anyone can do that. In fact, you might not even have to make any changes to your privacy notice at all. 11-year-old, it gets a bit more tricky because there are then situations or wording that they don't understand. I have actually got a privacy policy which I wrote for an app for 11-year-olds, and I'm fortunate at the time to have a granddaughter who was 11, and so I was able to bounce it off of her, literally, to say, what do you think of this? Do you understand it? Do you understand what it means? And I didn't promise her any reward for saying the right things. Um, she generally looked at it and said, yes, she did understand it. I gave her a couple of little questions and she understood it, which was brilliant. I did reward her for a time because so you should, but that was relatively easy to do. Once you get younger than that, though, once you get younger than 11, it can become really tricky. And I'd respectfully suggest that once you get younger than 11, you are probably better off providing a privacy notice as a form of cartoons or illustrations rather than trying to make it lots and lots of words, which they're not going to read, they're not going to understand. I have done that once, and it was quite an expensive, protracted process. Um, but you can do it. There are illustrators who can provide the illustrations for you. But it's an important thing to be aware of that you need to do that. In terms of default settings, again, make as much default as you can so the child doesn't have to worry too much about what they're setting, but make sure the default settings are on the side of safety. And we've already mentioned about the geolocation and profiling limits. So how do you apply the children's code in practice then? Um, think about how children will interact with your service. Use design to protect them, not just to inform them. And DPIA should include a child-focused risk analysis. So you design the product with children in mind and then conduct a DPIA, but for the children using it, not for adults using it, but for the children using it. And embed those safeguards in your development. So, as I said earlier, it's about embedding the mindset really into the development of the app or the website or whatever it is, to always think, are we doing this as in a safer way as we can for the children or young people who are going to be using the app or service, whatever it is we're designing. And a lot of that is data minimization, because the less data you hold, the less you need to worry about how simple you're keeping it. So if you really don't need to know things from the children, don't ask them. And then you don't know, and you don't have to hold that data. Also means, of course, that if they make a data subject access request at a later date, you haven't got to hunt around and find that data because you never collected it in the first place. So there's lots of pluses both sides to actually having a app which is designed in line with the children's code. By the way, I should just emphasize something here. The children's code only has to apply where you are deliberately designing your app or solution or website at children, at young people. If it's a site that's designed for adults, and I don't mean an adult site by that, I mean a site that's normally you don't expect adults to use, say like an insurance quote site, then that doesn't need to comply with children's code. If a child does happen to find their way onto there, well, yes, they're probably going to struggle and not stay on the site anyway. But you don't need to design it in line with children's code because you're not aiming it at children. What you should do, and what everybody should do, in fact, is within your privacy notice, you should have a line that says that our website is aimed at people over the age of 16 is typically the age. If you are under 16 or you become aware of anyone under the age of 16 using this website, you should leave the website. And I would always say as well, if you found that you maybe you are the parent or guardian for a young child, a young person, and you find they've been on a site that really they shouldn't have been on, then do always notify the site and ask them to delete any data related to your child that they may have entered whilst they were on the site. So, recap and key takeaways then for session 4. DPIAs help manage risk proactively, and the Children's Code reminds us to consider the needs of children by default. So, always look at the process. If there's any risk, as I use the screening sheet, if the screening sheet indicates there is any risk, then make sure you use a DPIA for those risky processes. And always err on the side of caution. If you're not sure whether you should use a DPIA or not, then do a DPIA. There's no harm in it. No one's gonna get drastically upset because you done DPIA when you didn't actually need to do one. So if you're unsure, play safe. Do a DPIA. If you're aiming at children at all, then do understand and apply the Children's Code. If you're not dealing with children, you can just ignore the Children's Code. But we do always have an obligation on everybody using any system to protect vulnerable users, whether that is children and young people or whether that's just vulnerable adults. You still have a responsibility to protect them and protect their data. So that brings us to the end of session 4. The slides from this presentation and the workbook will be sent out to you. So do let me know if you don't receive that in the next 24 hours or so. And with that, that ends this sessions of GDPR Essentials. I hope you found them useful. If they've sparked any ideas or indeed any questions, then I'd love to connect. Let's make your GDPR journey not just compliant, but confident and customer first. I'll leave those details there for a second so that anyone can note them down who needs to note them down. But so the slides will be sent out to you anyway. Hope you found the whole GDPR Essentials useful and informative. If you found it useful and informative, then please do feel free to go to my LinkedIn profile and leave a recommendation there. That's always very, very welcome, and I thank you for that. If you've got any queries at all, then please don't hesitate to get in touch. And if you want to explore how we could work together in the future further, please get in touch. But for now, I hope you found that really useful. I'm going to end the presentation and just give a chance to see if anybody's asked any questions. If you've got any questions, please just pop them in the chat. I'll give it a minute just to see if anybody's got any questions. Not seeing any today at the moment. So that was either crystal clear or I bored you all into submission. Let's hope it was the first one. In which case, I'm just say thank you very much for coming along to this today. I say I hope you found it useful. The slides will be circulated with the workbook, and any questions, please do get in touch. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye for now.